So with Scream 7 now officially confirmed to be in development, the entirety of the horror fandom is now seemingly going as far as to beg the question on whether or not we are going to be seeing the return of Neve Campbell's Sidney Prescott within the upcoming Scream movie, and if whether or not the question even then becomes if Sidney Prescott is even needed to be a part of Scream 7 to begin with. And so, with so much now riding on the line, joining me right now to further tackle the concept of what Scream 7 could introduce is my good friend and YouTuber that goes by the name of Mark and I. Now Mark, me and you have talked about this for quite some time, and we've even asked many of the fans on how they feel of having Sidney return, and so I think the question only then becomes, is Sidney Prescott even needed to be a part of Scream 7 to begin with? And so if you are, let's just say, on the side of seeing Sidney Prescott return, to which this is going to be a two-part video explaining both sides, I think when you go as far as to look at both sides objectively, I don't think that Scream 7 necessarily needs Sidney to begin with, but even then I do believe that Sidney's character should be a part of the story to some extent, because I don't think that by having her sit out and be on the sidelines would that be logical. But then again, you don't want to have the same trope be repeated in terms of having someone from Sidney's past, yet again a former boyfriend or a family of the boyfriend, be re-emerging once again within the story, only to now go as far as to attack her. I think we've seen this be done time and time again, and right now when you look at things objectively, I think that it is the Carpenter sisters' time to shine, especially with everything that we've seen go down now. But what I do believe needs to happen is Scream 7 needs to be different. Scream 7 needs to introduce, I think, different elements to the overall story and even a level of unpredictability in order to keep the story fresh. And so, to which my question ultimately then becomes, Mark, is do you think that Sidney is even needed within this franchise to begin with anymore? And although I do understand that some people are immediately going to say yes, the question only then becomes as to what kind of a role can she really play if you're not, I guess, going to have her as the main stars, but instead showcase the Carpenter sisters as being front and center to this movie, and even go as far as to do something different that would give Scream 7 a massive payoff by the very end.
I kind of don't mind having Neve Campbell and like Sidney out of the picture, because like on one hand I kind of feel like how much trauma does she need to go through, right? Like you can't just keep having someone who just wants to outdo the last killer and like put the final stab in Sidney so they can be super famous and take over as that like global phenomenon serial killer. It just seems like a little bit much. Now the formula that Scream's been following for a while now has always been like some sort of relative is trying to get revenge on one of the survivors because that survivor killed their relative in the previous film, which that person was a killer, which is really it's kind of tired to me a little bit. I liked Scream 6. I mean, I've liked all the Screams just because they're fun. I don't know if they're always good, but they're fun. But I think the plot sort of like, it's not, the twist is always like, oh, there's one more relative that you didn't know about, or oh, there, you know, it's not very interesting. Like I don't think the killer's big reveal is ever interesting. And that's the part that bothers me. It's always a brother, a sister, a dad that wants to like kill someone who killed their, but it's like they never stop to think for a second like, hey, my son or daughter is dead because they were a killer in the last, you know, series of events. Like maybe they deserved it. It's always like, nope, I love my son or daughter so much unconditionally and they were murdered, so I'm gonna go on a major killing spree and just cause this pain towards a bunch of innocent people because it just seems stupid. So, but also at the same time, I think Scream 6 proves that we don't need Sidney. And if this franchise wants to move on, there has to be a point where Neve Campbell just like walks away and is like, okay, like, you know, I'm gonna go find some other work somewhere, do something else and not do Scream. I think it would be nice. You kind of touched on something that I thought would be a good idea. Scream 7, don't incorporate Sidney. She doesn't have to be a part of it. She's dealt with all of her trauma and suffering and pain. That stuff is over. Like, leave her alone. We have a new cast of characters now. They're sort of now being shepherded by Gale, who maybe she dies, and then in 8, Neve Campbell comes back as Sidney to be like, all right, look, like, I've been through this, I've survived this a few times, like, let me help you. But, like, we're in uncharted territory now. The franchise is this many, you know, movies in, so we have to abide by a certain set of rules that maybe haven't been written yet, whatever. Personally, I mean, I'm still all for the idea of bringing back maybe Stu to finish the job. I really would have liked that. I think it would have been cool to just shock everyone and be like, hey, like, Stu's alive somehow, and Stu wants to prove that everyone is really bad at trying to emulate what he did so long ago. I think it would have been nice to have him step out and just be like, okay, like, yeah, like, you guys have all screwed this up. None of you are as good as the original. You'll never be as good as the original, which I think is also a really strong message that people carry forward in a franchise. oh, the second one is never as good as the original, or the third one is never good as the original, you know, or like we're just cash cowing it, like it's never going to be as good as it lost its heart. And I think bringing in a character like Stu would make that fun. What if Stu is the killer in like the next one? And what if he's the one causing all this pain, and then it's like maybe revealed at the end, and then maybe that means that Sidney has to come out and fight him or something like that. But at the same time, you got to remember, like, I don't think Stu has any, like, I'd have to look at all the lineage and the family lines here, because some of these characters are related to legacy characters, so you need to focus on Stu's relationship and why he would be after these people. I think killing the daughters of his partner probably makes sense, but I think at the same time, like, he might want to finish the job with Sidney, like, against her as well, so she would have to come out at some point. But I think 6 proves that we don't need Sidney to have a good time. We don't need Sidney for a plot to move forward and make sense. I think it's a problem if you just kind of recycle and rehash the exact same formula each and every time, and I think they've sort of been dipping their toes in that in a little bit, in the sense of, like, it's always a family member that wants revenge. Like, come on, there just needs to be something else. But at the same time, like, what does that mean? What does it mean if it's not a family member? It can't just be some random person who picks up the mantle who has no connection to the characters, because then it's like, one of the fun things about these movies is, like, you're sitting there in the audience in the theater and everyone is murmuring to each other, everyone's trying to figure out, like, who is the killer, who and why, and that's always like a lingering motif and theme that's being carried over our heads until the big reveal in the final act. So, like, if you pick some random person and no one could have guessed, that might leave people a little bit salty. There needs to be a connection to the characters, but maybe just not a family member who's out for revenge because their son or daughter was killed by the survivors, especially when their son or daughter was a killer and deserved it. So, I don't know. To answer the question in short, do we need Sidney? No. Like, should she come back? Sure, she should wrap up when they, like, clear this, the final generations out, or, like, the legacy generations out, and make way for the new, which is what they're doing. But I think Neve doesn't want to be a part of it because she's not getting paid what she's worth. I think Courtney Cox is going to be around, and they should kill her off as well, because, like, we just don't need her any longer. That cow has been milked far too much. And with Dewey gone, it shows that they're willing to sacrifice those characters to move on. And I think maybe, like, you can give Gale, like, a peaceful send-off, and maybe she doesn't die. But I don't know, part of me still kind of thinks that Sidney should die, but in a sacrificial way. I think she should take down, like, the biggest big bad of all that, you know, maybe appears at some point and sacrifices herself to save everybody else. But what that looks like, how that's delivered, no idea. Is that something that we'll see in 7, or is that something we'll have to see in 8, or is it something we'll never see at all? I have no idea, but it is something that I do think we sort of need at this point.
See, now I think that's the tricky part to this story, because if you're going to have Sid be involved to some capacity, then if there's going to be somewhat of a killer be involved who isn't going to be someone who was brought back from her past, let's just say Stu as an example, then what do you think they could do to introduce a different kind of enemy to our heroes, in which is representative to someone of their past, but not really someone that is from their past directly that comes back? Because obviously enough resurrection and supernatural elements aren't really a part of this franchise to begin with, so if you're not going to be doing anything wacky like that, then how do you go about by introducing a different approach to this film that doesn't really give way by having it be somewhat of a boyfriend or someone that's kind of connected to someone else's past, but more or less introduce a fresh new character that maybe does have somewhat of a connection to somebody in the past, but just completely has different motives to begin with that would allow for Scream 7 to just overall feel like a different film altogether?
Leslie Mocker. I said this in one of our previous conversations, that she was never seen, only mentioned before, as Stu's sister. I think that while I mentioned that I wouldn't like to see a bunch of, like, revenge things, this is the one exception I would make for that, is that if it's family getting revenge, that's tired and boring, but I would like to see Leslie Mocker come out. And dude, get this. So I just pulled up the Scream fandom because I want to remember whether or not she was the older or younger sister, and it says that Leslie Mocker is going to be in Scream 7. So she was mentioned only in Scream 2022, but she is going to appear in Scream 7. It doesn't say if it's going to be like a prominent role. It doesn't say by her, but she has all the reason to want to get more revenge than anybody else, because she's related to the original killer. Her dad was killed, her son was killed. Like, there's a lot riding on her reasoning for wanting to do this. We don't know anything about her other than she's related to multiple killers. We know nothing about her. Now, I said before, and I know this is a stretch, what I would have liked to have seen is that Stu somehow lives and that Leslie has been keeping him alive. That's what I would have liked to have seen. If in terms of how they would bring back Stu, the explanation for bringing back Stu, I don't know, maybe she has some sort of, I don't know, maybe she works with the authorities, maybe she works in the morgue, maybe she works in the coroner's office, I don't know, maybe she works somewhere where she swapped out somebody's body, who knows? There's a multitude of ways that they can make that work. But I think that, and then maybe, keeping like Stu and helping him through like maybe some sort of a therapy, and he's trying to like get to be strong, and he's watching all these killers like take his rightful role as like the most recognizable killer in this franchise, and he wants revenge, and she's there to help him. Or he really is dead, he's never coming back, that's the end of it, and Leslie wants revenge. That's what I've wanted to see for the longest time, because her son is dead, her brother is dead, like who else knows like what other traumas that she's experienced over these years, and she's the only character that I can think of that has been mentioned, that is tied to killers, and has never been seen. So there's something there. And also, like, she has all the reason to want to do this, all the reason to want to do the kill. I've said before that I also thought maybe, one of the legacy characters could just like lose their shit and become a killer. I always thought it would be dope if Gale was a killer because she wanted to have a story or a scoop. It's kind of like, it reminds me of what they did in Dead by Daylight with the Scream or Ghostface killer. For legal reasons, they had to change some things up as to like that version of the killer and who it is. It's like a whole new Ghostface for the game, because the game Dead by Daylight has some amazing killers in it with some amazing lore. I spent hours reading the lore because it's very fascinating. But the character of Ghostface in that game is a guy who works for a newspaper, and he's always getting the inside scoops. He's always there to get the story like before anybody else. Why? Because he's the one committing the atrocities. He's the killer, and then he covers the news on it, waits until the story gets like picked up, and bam, he prints his work, and he's the first one, and he's just like getting recognition all over the place. And then if anyone gets a little bit too close, he moves on and goes to a next town, or next Providence, city, state, whatever, and he repeats his cycle over and over again. And I thought that there was some sort of stuff that you could do with Gale in that way, but I think fans would be pissed because she's a legacy character, she's a good guy, she's a hero. The idea of making Luke Skywalker like evil just can't be done, and while Gale is not the Luke Skywalker of this story, you can't really make her evil. But I thought, in theory, that would make sense, simply because, like, if you look at a lot of people that commit, like, heinous acts, heinous crimes, a lot of it has to do with their upbringing, a lot of it has to do with their trauma, and I've read that a lot of the trauma that young people experience, in order to cope with that, in order to manage that, they have to make it seem like in their brain, they have to rationalize that the horrible acts that were brought against them are okay, or are normal. And that's why a lot of trauma victims go on to commit those acts to other people or their children or whatever, like whether it's spousal abuse, child abuse, whatever, stuff like that. That's how it carries on. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a scientist, I don't 100% know, that's just stuff that I've read on the internet, so take that all with a grain of salt. But I've always thought that, considering Gale Weathers' like position in all this, she would have made an excellent killer because she's killed people before. Dewey is now dead, and that's going to have a huge psychological impact on her. And she's getting older, and we all succumb to the pressure and the weight of being older and looking back on our lives and wondering whether or not we've left our mark. And Gale is probably looking at her life, and she's wondering whether or not she's going to be remembered, because that's the only thing that we have when we die, is our legacy. Is her legacy what she wanted to be? Is it formed exactly how she wanted to be formed? Is it exactly how she wants to be remembered for generations? Who knows? Is taking it in the direction of becoming a killer a way of, like, ensuring that she does not get lost in the pages of history? I don't know, but I thought that there was something there to explore story-wise. So I always thought that made sense, because Tara sort of carries that same burden. She's a young girl, she's the daughter of a killer, and she's coping with the fact that she's related to someone who's ultimately, like, I wouldn't say that necessarily being a serial killer is like genetic in any way, but she's worried about that. She's worried that the sins of the father are going to catch up to her and that she's going to turn into something like nasty. And she's worried about that. So I think that there's some work with that as well. And so I think there's a portion of that to consider. But I certainly do think that overall, I think the best choice for the next killer would be Leslie Mocker, without a doubt. Because she has the most that she's lost, and she's a legacy character that's never been seen. And now, according to the Scream fandom website, that she is actually going to be in Scream 7 in some capacity. What that means, I don't know. But you heard it here first. You and I were the first ones to mention Leslie, and we were the first ones to talk about how she would be a killer. So if she's the killer in Scream 7, that was us. We did it. We influenced Hollywood, and we should be getting a writing credit.
And you know, not for nothing, that's what I believe is interesting, is having Leslie Mocker within the story to begin with, which we are going to be touching bases on the next video talking about this. So again, let us know what you all think about Scream 7 down in the comment section below. Do you guys believe that Sidney is needed, or are you guys more or less on the side of not minding her sitting this one out too to begin with, especially after seeing what Scream 6 was like? So once again, thank you all so much for watching, everybody. Thank you all so very much for your time. To which, once again, if you also just so happen to be a fan of horror, then I do encourage for you guys to head on over and smash that subscribe button and give this video a big fat thumbs up by smashing that like button down below if you guys enjoyed. Tune back in for more. Thank you all so much for being here, and with that being said, we'll be seeing each and every single one of you down in the comment section below and in the next video. Take it easy, everybody, and have a great day. Peace.